I'm filmmaker Kevin Hirschner.
And I'm music producer Chris Sangster.
This is Scenes and Songs. Welcome, I'm Kevin Hirschner. Thank you so much for tuning in. You are watching the Season 1 finale of Scenes and Songs, the show that dissects outstanding movie and music pairings.
And I'm Chris Sangster. Each episode, we pick one scene and one song to break down for you. And on this final episode of Season 1, we're talking about Top Gun.
Hate it or love it, you cannot deny the cultural impact of Top Gun. It's a movie that is still relevant to this day. There's a lot of classic songs in this film, but the song we've chosen is what we consider the unofficial theme song of Top Gun, of course, Danger Zone.
That's right. And full disclosure, Top Gun was one of my all-time favorite movies as a kid. This movie's been a part of my life for a really, really long time. And in fact, it was the playing with the boys scene, the volleyball scene, that inspired the idea of this whole podcast. So, I really, really love Top Gun. But the true heart of the film musically to us was Danger Zone, so that's the one we're going to talk about today. It's the one everybody knows and loves, and it's the one that has most cemented itself as a part of our culture. So let's head on over to the screening room so Kevin can tell you all about Top Gun.
The late Tony Scott's Top Gun was released on May 16, 1986. Despite its relatively modest budget, the action drama about student pilots at the real-life U.S. Naval Aviation Instruction Program went on to become the highest-grossing film of the year. And although many criticized the at-times cliché and melodramatic storyline, the film was lauded for its technical achievements in aerial photography, practical special effects, unique editing style, and soundtrack. Much of those achievements can be traced directly to the film's director, even if, at first glance, he may have seemed like an odd hire for the high-octane ode to American exceptionalism. Growing up in England, Tony Scott originally dreamed of becoming a successful painter. He even studied at the Royal College of Art in London for several years, before reluctantly becoming a director of television commercials at the behest of his older brother, fellow director Ridley Scott. The Scott brothers and their associates found great success directing commercials, and eventually the elder Scott and many of his English colleagues successfully transitioned to feature films. But the younger Scott would have to wait a little bit longer for opportunity to knock at his door. In the meantime, Scott added music video and television directing gigs to his still thriving commercial business. And finally, in the early 1980s, just shy of his 40th birthday, Scott finally had the chance to direct his first feature, an erotic horror film about a vampire love triangle titled The Hunger. It was a dud, critically and commercially. So Scott retreated back to commercials and music videos, worrying that he would never get another opportunity to direct a Hollywood feature film. But what Scott didn't know is that while he was attempting to break into Hollywood, a pair of up-and-coming producers were attempting to greenlight the very film that would change both the arc of his career and his life forever. Jerry Bruckheimer and Don Simpson dreamed of making what they envisioned as Star Wars on Earth after they read a magazine article about the high-flying, thrill-seeking pilots at the U.S. Navy's Top Gun Academy in Miramar, California. And they had their sights set on a young, passionate director with the technical experience that would be required to turn their dream into a reality. The stars were finally aligning for Scott. Not only were Bruckheimer and Simpson genuine fans of Scott's derided directorial debut, but they were familiar with his work in commercials, specifically a commercial Scott had made for SAAB, which features a car racing an airplane. Although Scott was eager and excited to take another crack at a Hollywood film, he didn't have an immediate grasp on the material. Scott's original vision for Top Gun was what he described as Apocalypse Now on an aircraft carrier. Unfortunately for Scott, his vision did not mesh with the vision of his producers or the United States military, who were providing the filmmakers with unprecedented access to locations, materials, and resources. Scott went back to the drawing board, researching the source material and meeting with pilots until it finally hit him. The film shouldn't be Apocalypse Now. It should be rock and roll. Rather than shooting this film like a traditional film, Scott would rely on his vast experience as a music video director using high contrast cinematography, slow motion footage, and spastic quick cuts to capture the story of Maverick, the renegade hotshot pilot who always plays by his own rules. The ultimate rock star of the sky. And what would any good rock star be without his signature song? Now let's head over to the studio so Chris can break down the song for you.
That signature song from Top Gun is Danger Zone by Kenny Loggins. The film's producers, Don Simpson and Jerry Bruckheimer, along with music supervisor Michael Dilbeck and music editor Bob Badami, had hundreds of songs to choose from when starting to plan what would become one of the best-selling movie soundtracks of all time. To start things off, they held what in the industry is referred to as a cattle call. Musicians, songwriters, and singers far and wide were invited by the soundtrack's label, Columbia Records, to multiple early screenings of the film, in hopes that they would submit songs to form the basis of the soundtrack. At the end of these screenings, the producers had hundreds of cassette tapes to sift through. Allegedly, they would only listen to a song for about 5 seconds, and if it didn't click, it was on to the next one. This cattle call did result in a few keeper tunes, but after testing hundreds of songs against the intro scene of the film, nothing was clicking. Finally, they gave up their search for the perfect intro song and turned to Bruckheimer's go-to composer and Scenes and Songs favorite, Giorgio Moroder, for help. The result? A rocking tune with driving guitars and a catchy synth bass, co-written by Tom Whitlock. Now, who's this Tom Whitlock guy? Well, Tom Whitlock was born in Springfield, Missouri, and he was inspired to take up the drums by his hometown's musical television program, the Ozark Jubilee. He studied music collegiately for a time, but decided quickly to move on. Once in LA, Tom used his quick wits and knowledge of auto mechanics of all things to work his way into the good graces of none other than Giorgio Moroder. One day, Giorgio, who had been doing as all great rock stars do, complaining that his Ferrari wasn't running properly, was introduced to young Tom Whitlock, who offered to fix the broken brakes on Giorgio's Ferrari. He did just that, and through that experience, became somewhat of a personal assistant to Giorgio. One day, Tom mentioned, "Oh, by the way, if you ever need a lyricist, I can write lyrics too." So with his usual co-writers unavailable for this project, Giorgio tapped young Tom to write the lyrics for his musical contributions to the Top Gun soundtrack. These songs went to number 2 and number 1 respectively on the Billboard charts, and you know them as Danger Zone and Take My Breath Away. Wow. With Whitlock's help, Moroder had finally penned a tune that caught the ear of the producers, and now the task was to find a singer. And an arduous task it was. Bryan Adams was initially approached but turned it down because he did not agree with the film's pro-war politics. REO Speedwagon declined because they didn't want to be involved in any movie soundtrack. Corey Hart was also approached at the time but declined to focus on his own music. Finally, the band Toto was slated to sing Danger Zone, and their ballad Only You was to be the love scene song. However, a dispute between the band's lawyers and the production team caused them to pull out at the last minute. Finally, they went back to their cattle call of singers from Columbia and found folk singer Kenny Loggins, who had already penned the song Playin' with the Boys for the volleyball scene. Loggins initially chose to write for that scene because he figured everybody else would write for the flight scenes. About his involvement with Danger Zone, Loggins said in an interview, "I got lucky on that one. Toto was originally selected to sing the song, but their lawyers didn't get along and they needed a singer in a hurry. I was in the studio recording another song for Top Gun, and they asked me if I'd be interested in doing Danger Zone. I needed an up-tempo song in my show, so I said yes, and the rest is history." After that, Tom Whitlock went to meet with Loggins at his Encino home, and Kenny added a few original touches of his own. They then headed to the studio to record the vocals, which Loggins says were inspired by the Tina Turner records he was listening to at the time, stating that he employed a vocal style on that record that he had never tried before and hasn't returned to since, and that was inspired by Tina. Loggins himself started his career penning songs for the Nitty Gritty Dirt Band before finding commercial success with the folk duo Loggins and Messina, formed with former Poco guitarist Jim Messina. Loggins has said that he always wanted to be a member of The Who growing up, but when he sat down to write, only folk songs came out. Danger Zone was his chance to unleash his inner rocker. Now that the singer was firmly in place, it was time for a classic Giorgio Moroder trick: supplement his excellent synth work with top-tier studio musicians. In this case, he had John Robinson, who played on Michael Jackson's Off the Wall and Quincy Jones's We Are the World, handled just the drum fills. I believe the rest of the drums were programmed, but he had a live drummer come in for just the fills. And then for the sax solo at the end, he employed the talents of Blues Brothers band member and leader of the LA Express, Tom Scott. For the guitar work, he brought in ace session player Dan Huff, a real-life guitar hero from the band Giant, who is now a big-time Nashville producer, producing records for Faith Hill, Keith Urban, and many, many more. And of course, they topped it all off with the king of the movie soundtrack, Kenny Loggins, who during the 1980s became a mainstay in the world of movie soundtracks, composing or performing on such hits as I'm Alright from Caddyshack, the theme from Footloose, I Believe in Love from the 1976 version of A Star Is Born, and of course Danger Zone and Playing with the Boys from Top Gun. All of these excellent musicians came together to create this rocking tune that would typify the adrenaline-fueled madness that was the 1980s. It would also be used as the theme song for Top Gun's own adrenaline junkie, the rock star of the sky, Pete Maverick Mitchell. Now let's head over to the Nook to break down the iconic song and scene even further.
Without a doubt, Danger Zone is the theme song of the movie. It's this theme song for Maverick. You know, Maverick is the bad boy of the sky. He's got his going Mach 2 with his hair on fire. You know, this is it typifies, it exemplifies this character of Maverick, who is clearly the protagonist of the film. You know, all he cares about is going fast and going faster, flying jets, being crazy as he can be. He's on the highway to Danger Zone. The song actually plays 3 different times in the film. The most iconic moment, of course, is Tom Cruise right when he is getting to Miramar. He's on his motorcycle and he's racing the jet, and he's got the fist pump. Right. He just it typifies the movie. It typifies Maverick. It works perfectly with the theme song. Honestly, whenever Tom Cruise dies, which I'm assuming is going to be in the next 150 to 200 years, that will probably be the image of his in memoriam on the Oscars.
Yeah.
It is the example of Tom Cruise. Tom Cruise is Maverick. It's one of the reasons he was so perfect for this role, and one of the reasons why this song was so perfect for the part of Maverick. It is the ultimate theme song for Maverick.
Definitely, 100%. It is the embodiment of Maverick and that bad boy image. And you know, the many times I've seen Top Gun way too many times. But I've seen this movie a lot, and I've thought about this movie a lot, and I've come to a conclusion about Top Gun. And that conclusion is that Top Gun is not an action film. Top Gun is actually a musical disguised as an action movie. And it has all of the different aspects that go into making a great musical. It has all the different song types. It has all the different tropes of musicals. And Danger Zone for me is Maverick's solo, right? So in a musical, a big song type, if you will, is the solo. In an opera, it's called an aria, but you know, it's the song that the dude sings, right? The main guy, he has his song. He gets up there and he sings about his adventure or his life or his troubles or whatever, but he has this big moment, usually somewhere near the beginning of the film to introduce this main character, right? They have a big solo. And for Maverick, it's certainly Danger Zone.
So Maverick is the lead tenor.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Maverick is our lead tenor.
Center stage.
For sure. Definitely. And even the way Danger Zone comes back throughout the film, it's almost like a reprisal, which you would see a lot of times in musicals, where one of the big main numbers of the musical would be reprised again at the end, where it's a little bit different and maybe the character is seeing it through a different lens or coming at it from a different perspective because of the journey they've been on. And you can certainly see that with Danger Zone and the way they bring it back after they've done it in the scene that we just discussed with Maverick on the bike going to Top Gun, they bring it back right before Goose dies, which is really the end of his journey at Top Gun. So you could think of that as kind of the reprisal of Top Gun, if you will, the restatement of the theme with this new kind of information behind it because of the story. And it also kind of bookends Maverick's time at Top Gun, right? It's kind of a nice opening and closing this idea of danger zone and Maverick's journey throughout. So that's really like Maverick's big solo moment. But there are lots of other different types of musical numbers that are often found in musical theater. Certainly one of them is duets, right? Where two characters would sing something together. I think the perfect example of this in Top Gun is Take My Breath Away, right? The big love song. It's Maverick and Charlie's duet, if you will. It kind of weaves nicely through all the scenes in the middle of the film of their courtship and then culminates in the very famous sex scene, right? Which when the song finally plays in earnest, and to me that's Maverick and Charlie's duet. That's their love duet, right?
Yeah, which I mean, and you could even make an argument that scene is more iconic, it's more parodied, more well known than even the Danger Zone scene.
Certainly, and I think furthermore, you could also say that Take My Breath Away kind of represents a side of Maverick that's a bit opposite to the Danger Zone side. It's maybe a side that he doesn't even know he has, and one that possibly he never gets in touch with, right? That he might not ever fully lean into that side of him, but it certainly represents something else than the going Mach 2 with your hair on fire side. This more romantic side of him that could have this relationship with Charlie, possibly, right?
The character has to learn something and embrace something that's the opposite of him so he can grow and change and have that arc. So that makes sense that you would have to have this scene in there.
Yeah, absolutely. And in musicals, a lot of times the duet is used to bring two characters together and then to set them off in their respective directions. And I kind of think Take My Breath Away takes that place in Top Gun. But there's many, many more musical numbers in Top Gun, aren't there? So another obvious type of musical number in musical theater is the ensemble piece. So trios, quartets, quintets, sextets, all these things that are a group of cast members singing something together. Not the whole cast, but a select members of the cast singing something together. So a great example of this in Top Gun is the You've Lost That Love and Feeling scene.
Oh, and all the guys at the bar.
Exactly, right? It's literally all the boys singing a song together. Like, this is the most on the nose one probably because the characters literally sing, right? And they trade off solos just like you would do in the kind of a boys ensemble piece in a musical, right? Think about Grease Lightning in Grease, where it's kind of there to show that the car has transformed, but it's really there to give, what's his name, Kanicki and all the other, I can't remember all the names, but all the boys get a chance to sing solos and do their dance number in Grease Lightning. You've Lost That Love and Feelings doing the exact same thing for Top Gun, right?
Yeah, literally.
It's advancing the plot slightly by giving Maverick and Charlie like their meeting point, but then it's really just a chance for the boys to sing. It's really what it's all about. And then even more than that, the playing with the boys scene is all about the theatrics, right? It's all about the two villains and the two heroes singing their quartet together, right? Just doing the most theatrical moment they could think of, basically.
I mean, when you think about it, I mean, the volleyball scene really does not advance the plot at all. It has no narrative effect. The only narrative reasoning I could figure out why that scene exists is so Maverick can be a little late for his date with Charlie.
Right, yeah.
That's honestly the only reason that I can come up with, other than, like you said, just to be theatrical and entertain.
Yeah, and I think that is very on brand for musicals, is doing something that is maybe a bit extraneous or is maybe a bit off topic of the plot or not even really relevant at all, but just amps up the theatrics, just takes the showiness of it to the next level. And the volleyball scene is all that in a bag of cheese, you know? It's
so
great.
What would you consider the Great Balls of Fire scene?
Well, the Great Balls of Fire scene is interesting to me because it's another one where the characters are literally singing like they would be in a musical, right? But it also kind of represents all of these types of songs, if you will, because it starts as a solo for Goose. He even says it in the cockpit, "Great balls of fire," right? So it kind of starts out as Goose's solo, as the theme song for Goose, if you will. But then throughout that great little scene in the diner, it's a solo for Goose, then it becomes a duet with him and Maverick, and then it becomes an ensemble piece with when the two ladies join in, and it's the two couples singing together, which is a very obvious musical theater thing that you would have these two couples doing a quartet, right? And so it kind of almost hits every one of those beats all in this little 30-second scene.
I heard that the idea to have Goose perform Great Balls of Fire, which Anthony Edwards does not play piano in real life, but the idea for Great Balls of Fire apparently was Tony Scott's idea on the morning of. His regimen for all of his years working in films was he would wake up like 2.5 hours before they would shoot, and he would storyboard all his scenes for that was his thing. And apparently during that time he didn't feel like Goose had enough depth to him, and so he came up with this idea and told the guys to shoot it, and they did it, and it worked out great. But kind of like you were saying, it does add a lot of depth to the foursome.
Absolutely, yeah.
Shows them coming together in a way that you haven't really visualized on screen at that point.
Certainly, yeah, and it is a great little scene. It's not throwaway by any stretch of the imagination. I almost think the Playing with the Boys scene is more throwaway than the Great Balls of Fire scene.
Oh yeah,
from like a character development perspective.
100%.
Yeah, right. But it is another musical piece, another song that is in here, just like a musical would go from dialogue to song, from dialogue to song. Top Gun is doing the exact same thing here. Scenes of dialogue and scenes of songs. And the end, when they finally beat the MiGs and they've landed back on the aircraft carrier and everybody's hurrahing and backslapping and all that stuff, we have the Top Gun anthem over the top. The ba 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 ba, that famous guitar line from Harold Faltermeyer that really serves as the chorus. Right? It's kind of the group cast sing, if you will, at the end of the musical. Think in Les Mis when they do You Hear the People Sing at the end. It's everyone that's been involved, that's still alive.
All the background
people, all the chorus members, everybody comes together to sing that final number. And that's a very typical beat of a musical where you have all these different people that come together in one final moment to make the final statement, the final big statement piece of the musical. And I think the Top Gun anthem serves as that in Top Gun. It's that final moment. It's teased in the beginning, which you can think of as kind of an overture, when you see the first scenes of the aircraft carrier, and then by the time we're done with the whole story, we're on that same aircraft carrier and we have the whole ensemble cast singing, their victory anthem, if you will. And it's all very emotional and it sounds, I don't know, for lack of a better term, musical, right?
So Top Gun has solos, duets, ensembles, chorus, overture, all the key aspects of any hit musical.
Absolutely. And it also has an orchestra, in my opinion, which would be another musical aspect of musical theater, right? Would be the pit orchestra, which would be playing, the incidental music or the background music to the songs, adding emotional excitement. And in Top Gun, Harold Faltermeyer's awesome score mixed with the brilliant sound effects work. Think about all the jet noises, the sound of the breathing masks, the missile lock sound, like all of this really intricate special effects works that mixes with Faltermeyer's like cool rocky synth score. All that to me is the orchestra, right? That's the incidental music. That's the emotional bed of the movie. And that's what the role of the pit orchestra would be doing in a musical theater piece.
Yeah, I mean, when you lay it out like that, it makes sense.
I'll do you one further. I'll do you one further, right? So at the very end of the movie, at the very end of musical theater, at the very end of a play, what generally happens, right? The curtain goes down, the curtain comes back up, and everybody comes out to take a bow, right? Everybody gets their little moment where they bow and everybody claps, right? Yay. So in Top Gun, they end the movie the exact same way. After our rah-rah Top Gun anthem scene, you get a shot of every lead character from the movie.
In the credits?
In the credits.
The title credits?
With the title cards that say their name and the actor's name. It's a bow. Maverick, Tom Cruise, bow, right? Kelly McGillis, Charlie, bow. Anthony Edwards, Goose. They're coming out and doing their bow. And then you see...
Don't they even do it in reverse order? Like typically in a movie, you're going to have... Tom Cruise would be the first person that would be credited. But in a musical, typically the lead actor is the one who comes out last.
Yeah,
I think it's reverse, isn't it? Like a musical?
Ugh.
I think Tom Cruise is the last one that they show.
I think he is. You know, I'm not 100% sure about that. I have to be honest. But I think you could be right. Nonetheless, they do all get their bow, and then 2 planes are showing riding off into the sunset, which to me is the curtain coming down on it all. So that's the final beat, really, of a musical would be the bow. And I think Top Gun has one, honestly, even more so than you can say a credit roll is. But regardless of the order of the actors being shown and everything, I do think there is an even further bit of musical theater in Top Gun. And that comes in the form of, first, the great theatrical costumes. I mean, that's really kind of obvious, but you know, they've got these cool helmets and the cool planes and the dress whites and everything. It's all nice costumes. Well costumed. You know, even Maverick's leather jacket with all those patches, and he's got the cowboy boots, and it's all, the costuming is a bit theatrical. But I can understand where you say, hey Chris, you know, all movies have great costumes.
But like you said, I mean, pilots in the Navy, that material already leads itself well to the types of costumes that you would see in a stage musical.
Totally.
You can look and immediately see, oh, okay, those are the military guys. These are, you know, the civilians. And
absolutely.
So that does make sense.
So yeah, so that one, you know, that one's interesting.
It lends itself nicely to that.
Sure. But for me, the one that really made it click for me is I was thinking about all this, and I'm like, all right, so Top Gun has all these songs, it's got this great look and everything, but there's something that musicals have that for a while I couldn't figure out if Top Gun does, and that's dancers. Musicals always have great dance numbers, right? We were talking about...
Do they dance in... They don't dance in... And You Lost That Love and Feeling, do they? I mean, the guys like do this thing.
Yeah, it's kind of more blocking, I would say,
but they
than
don't
dancing.
Dance in that, right?
No, and I mean, maybe you could say playing volleyball is a form of dancing, but no, that's not my theory. My theory is that the dancers are the airplanes. The jet airplanes,
the dumbest thing I've ever heard,
are the dancers. Now check this out, right?
All right, change my mind.
So there's all these musical numbers that seem like a musical, but where are the dance numbers? We haven't seen dancing in Top Gun, but we have. There's 5 different scenes that's basically just airplanes flying around with shots of the guys in the cockpit in between saying some funny lines. But the majority of it is this awesome flight choreography. And that's what it is. It's choreography. It was pre-planned, it was thought about, and it was executed to perfection to get all of these shots of these planes doing these crazy maneuvers and weaving in and out and flying really low to the ground. And all of this stuff, this motion, feels like dancing. The planes are the dancers.
You son of a gun. No, but honestly, I don't know how that Top Gun has not been made into a musical.
Right.
I mean, think about how many. There was literally a Larry Bird and Magic Johnson musical on Broadway. How is Top Gun not been made into a musical? But you saying the planes would be the dancers, it just puts in a great image in my head of a high school production of this where the background dancers have plane costumes on and they're doing their choreography. Which, if there's a enterprising high school musical department out there, we are giving you this idea for free. Yeah. We will fly to wherever you are in the continental United States to come see this performance.
Absolutely, 100%.
I would love to see that.
Dude, I'm totally with it. I don't think it's too much of a stretch, and I think the flight choreography and the scenes of the airplanes flying were something that was really thought out, and a lot of time and energy was put into in Top Gun. And although I'm having a bit of fun with it, it does serve a similar purpose in Top Gun that dancing serves in a musical, and that it heightens the action and it shows off the expertise of the people involved in making it, right? So seeing someone sing is impressive, but seeing someone sing while they're tap dancing is even more impressive. So seeing actors sing and do these musical numbers is impressive, but then you couple that with all these amazing flight choreographed sequences and you get this over the top, super energetic action film that we have in Top Gun, which is really a musical.
All right, I accept your theory. Top Gun is a musical. I'm down for that. And I mean,
you heard it here first, folks.
I mean, like any musical, it's over the top.
Yeah.
Like we can all agree on that. In so many different ways, it's over the top. The action is over the top. The drama is over the top. The characters are theatrical. Even, I mean, this is a relatively mild PG family film, but it is overtly sexual. Like the sexuality is over the top, both heterosexual and homosexual. It is just so over the top and in your face. A lot over the years has been made out of the fact that this is this ultra macho film about these tough guys, yet it has all these homoerotic undertones.
Definitely.
So much so that you can't deny it. Every film criticism we read on this film made sure to include that in the story.
Certainly.
What we didn't see, and that what we wanted to add to that discussion, was what we came up with. We took our top 5 lines from Top Gun that sound like they could be from a gay porno.
Scenes and Songs presents Top 5 Lines from Top Gun that sound like they could be from a gay porno. Turbulence is expected. Honorable mention.
One of life's simple joys is the boys. Kenny Loggins.
Kenny Loggins. Number 5.
The list is long but distinguished. Goose.
Oh, Flyboy.
Yeah? Well, so is my Johnson. Slider.
Did someone say Johnson? Number 4.
30 seconds, Wolfman, or I'm coming in.
You don't need to wait.
Slider.
Slide right in. Number 3.
I want some butts. Air Boss Johnson.
Who's the boss now? Number 2.
We nailed that son of a bitch. Maverick.
Lieutenant.
You really are cowboys. Iceman.
No settle required. Number 1.
Hi, it's Wolfman. Yeah, Maverick just quit. Wolfman.
From our cockpit to yours. Thanks for watching Scenes and Songs presents Top 5 Lines from Top Gun that sound like they could be from a gay porno. Forever.
And so the reason that we bring this up is not to obviously poke fun at the LGBTQ community, or even to poke fun at the movie. Like we said, a lot has been made about these homoerotic undertones of the film. And there is a great discussion to be had about why in 1986, or frankly, even today, in 2019, that the filmmakers felt like they couldn't be more overt with this idea.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't even know if who in the chain of command between the studios and the producers and the directors, who is even on board with this idea. But through doing research on this film, the one person that we could absolutely, without a doubt, figure out that totally gets it is the director, Tony Scott. Like,
For sure.
All I can say about the guy in watching interviews and reading his commentary is that he just gets it. He understands what this movie is.
Mm-hmm.
And all of that was planned. He wasn't trying to make fun of the gay community. He wasn't trying to make fun of gay people. for whatever reason, it was just the approach and the aesthetic that he thought worked well for the film. I mean, he even said that the inspiration for the aesthetics of the film, both in how he wanted his characters to look and then how he would shoot them, was inspired by a book of photography from a famous LGBTQ photographer named Bruce Weber. And his book of photography at the time was very popular amongst the gay community. He even said that he shot the famous Playing with the Boys volleyball scene that has often been parodied with the idea that it would be a scene for both women and gay men.
Yeah.
He came with this idea. And one of the most famous examples of somebody breaking this down before us about how it's secretly a gay film is in the movie Sleep With Me, which came out in 1994. Quentin Tarantino has a cameo as an actor where he's a guy at a party and he's giving a long, detailed breakdown analysis of why Top Gun is secretly the story of gay pilots in the Navy. Quentin Tarantino and Tony Scott were good friends at this point.
Mm-hmm.
I find it super hard to believe that at some point Quentin Tarantino didn't try this theory out on Tony Scott and probably got at least some sort of approval.
Definitely. And like you said, it wasn't necessarily that Tony Scott set out to actually make a movie about gay Navy fighter pilots. He didn't. But what he did do is purposefully ratchet the sexuality up to 11. Like he ratcheted everything up to 11, right? The movie was, in his words, rock and roll, right? He knew what he was doing. He wanted to make this rock star in the sky type of film that embodied all of these elements of these fighter pilots who really were larger than life type of figures. So he wanted to amp up the action, amp up the violence, amp up the sexuality, amp it all up to like give this, rock and roll feel to it all.
There's a quote from Val Kilmer where he says the only people that have bigger egos than actors and rock stars is pilots.
Yeah, exactly. There you go. So that was the whole idea.
And the thing about Tony Scott is that he was very aware of how he was perceived, how his films were perceived. He never got really the critical acclaim that he deserved in his lifetime. But he honestly, this isn't an over-exaggeration to say that he is one of the most influential action directors of the last 35 years.
Yeah.
You can make a direct connection, especially because of the partnership with Jerry Bruckheimer, but you can make a direct connection between Tony Scott and Michael Bay.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, the influence that he had on Paul Greengrass's career, who did all the Bourne movies and Captain Phillips a few years ago. I mean, his influence cannot be stated enough in that action genre.
Mm-hmm.
And this was his first action film. This was his first depth into that. And I mean, he nailed it. He nailed it perfectly. And
how much of his ability to capture this action film with mass appeal do you think comes from his background as a commercial director?
Oh, I think a ton. I mean, it's the reason they hired him to do the shoot, but it absolutely played a factor.
Yeah.
In the style that he would approach, and kind of in the same way that a commercial that is going to be on TV for everyone to see is going to be sexy and dangerous, but it's going to be in all these implied ways.
Mm-hmm.
He did the same thing with Top Gun.
Right.
He implied all of these. Even the famous sex scene it's two people kissing.
Yeah, for sure.
I mean, but the implication through the cinematography and the lighting and the music, it brings it all together.
Yeah, and it's not like he was super critical of facts or anything, right? During the I mean, there's a lot of, if you're looking at it from a perspective of a fighter pilot, there's a lot of things he, quote, got wrong about the life of a fighter pilot and how it all actually works, the mechanics of it all.
They had a technical advisor on the shoot, and they had several real pilots flying the planes, obviously. And there were a lot of times on set, apparently, that the technical advisors would pull him aside and be like, hey, that's, it doesn't really work because a pilot would do this or would do that. And apparently he would just listen and then at the end say, oh, no, it's all right. We're just making rock and roll, mate.
Right. There's another other quote about how he said that mom and pop in Kansas or Oklahoma or whatever won't know the difference. And that's who he was making the film for, right? He was making the film for the average American that doesn't know or particularly care about the semantics of flying jet fighter pilots,
But that's the whole thing about Tony Scott, is that he realizes it didn't necessarily have to make 100% real world sense to make cinema sense. Even the famous Take My Breath Away scene. She tracks him down outside, and it's in the middle of the day, and then it cuts to the next scene, and in their house, they're in the house, and it cuts to the beginning of what would be a sex scene. Right. It's the middle of the night. It's got the blue light coming in. I mean, theoretically, it could just be later in the day. They were spending time together until later in the night before things finally got to that point. But it really doesn't make sense when you think about it. When you think about no moon is that bright to send that much blue light in there. Yeah. Like, it doesn't make sense. But you've probably never thought about it until right now, because as a viewer of cinema, it works great. It works. One of the screenwriters on the film literally said, "Never let the truth get in the way of a good story."
Yeah, I think there's a lot to be said for that. And like you said, Tony Scott fully understood this.
Dude gets it.
Exactly. Guy gets it. Had a great grasp on this idea, and that's why he made this film in a way that was so commercially appealing. And in a similar light, I think Kenny Loggins, the lead singer of Danger Zone, gets it too, man. Like, Kenny's in on the joke, right? We said when he originally recorded Danger Zone, he was kind of putting on a voice. And he used the song as an opportunity to play a character that he kind of always imagined himself as, but in his music career hadn't really found that voice. He said when he went to write a song, came out as folk song, didn't come out as a rock song. But he used Danger Zone to kind of jump into this character of Maverick and put on a voice. And so he gets it. He never used that voice again in his career, right? The Danger Zone, all that. So you know what I mean? He gets it. And I mean, further evidence to the fact is him being in on all of these jokes about himself and Danger Zone in popular culture now, right? He plays himself in Family Guy. He plays himself in Archer. He even plays himself as the DJ of Los Santos Radio Rock in Grand Theft Auto 5, where he's a goofy radio DJ playing Kenny Loggins hits. Dude gets it, right? Dude gets it.
Oh, yeah. And I mean, the typical Kenny Loggins folk song would have been a terrible fit in this movie.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
It would have been awful.
Yeah,
he had to play this character in the same way that I'm sure, to a certain extent, Tom Cruise. I mean, I think he's kind of a high-octane, action-packed guy, but was playing this even more over-the-top character. Even Tony Scott, he was an avid rock climber in his life. I even heard a story that one of the reasons Jerry Bruckheimer hired Tony Scott for this film is because he had met him on a rafting trip. And at one point, there was a 30-foot tall rock face that Tony Scott, just for fun, climbed up without any sort of harness or any materials at all, just for fun, because that was his passion. That was he was into. So all these guys were inclined to this lifestyle, and we're just having so much fun with it, which is why the movie is so fun, why the song is so fun.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think after its release and its eventual huge success, everybody kind of gets that. You kind of get that feeling when you watch Top Gun, right? You know it's not exactly right, but it all feels so right. And I think the evidence of that was Navy fighter pilots themselves. When the movie first came out, they didn't like it. They thought it was weird and not correct, about not an accurate depiction of their life, right? But as it grew into this pop culture phenomenon and made them even bigger stars because the fighter pilot was the rock star, and of course the ladies loved it too, right? So all that combined, and fighter pilots started to love it, and now it's this, well-known piece of pop culture that is so intrinsically tied with naval aviation that they're almost inseparable in 2019.
Oh, the technical advisors on the film after that came out even said to Tony Scott, we were wrong.
Yeah.
You were right. When you took those liberties, you were 100% right.
Yeah.
You were absolutely right. Which kind of brings us to the point of what this whole movie was. So, I mean, this movie was put together by Jerry Bruckheimer and Don Simpson, who are, some of the most successful movie producers of all time. Mm-hmm. And they put this whole idea together for a few different goals, to create entertainment, to be fun, to create this big spectacle, to make a ton of money, which it did, and is still making money to this day. And although those were the motives, the execution was so well done that it has managed to have the kind of cultural impact that so many movies dream of.
Yeah. And
a few years ago, I went to a wedding of a very good friend of mine who I've known since I was a kid. I've known for over 20 years, who is a pilot in the military. He's actually currently right now stationed at Miramar. I have literally been to the hangar that they filmed at, and I've seen the planes there. It's incredible. And so at his wedding a few years ago, by the way, his call name is Fun. He actually has a call name just like Maverick and Viper and Slider and Goose. His call name is Fun. At his wedding, and his wife was also in the military at the time, at one point the DJ put on You've Lost That Loving Feeling, and all of his fellow buddies who are also in the military, they all circled around his bride and serenaded her with the song. None of these guys were even alive when this movie came out.
Right, yeah.
And it was still, they put the song on and everyone knew what to do, and they got down and it was hilarious.
Yeah.
And it was super fun. And so you can come at it with, hey, they started this cynically, we're just going to try to make money. And sure, you can have your preconceived notions about that. But at the end of the day, what they set out to do, they clearly accomplished. And a big part of that is how they combined the movie with the music. I mean, it is a prime example of an outstanding movie and music pairing, which is one of the reasons that we knew we had to do this as an episode.
Definitely. All that's spot on. And I think it's a perfect example of what we've been covering a lot through this first season of Scenes and Songs. It's movies that use songs and each of them come together to elevate each other to a new height, right? To the pairing makes a grander statement together than they would have each made on their own. And furthermore, I think the common thread throughout all of these things, and Top Gun was certainly no different, is that our interests were piqued by watching the films. But then once we dug into the research of things, all of this other stuff started revealing itself. And there were all of these other stories and people and ideas that were behind these pairings that made them these great statements, that made them these great pieces of art. And we just kind of had to pull at that thread to unravel the truth behind why these things work, why it was so effective, and why it jumped off the screen to us,
Definitely. And we joke amongst ourselves and on the show a ton about how much research we did, maybe even too much research we did. But I can guarantee you, however much research we did into discovering these outstanding movie and music pairings, the people who worked on them put tenfold the amount of energy and time and resources into putting it together. And so we hope throughout this first season, you, just like us, have come to as much of an appreciation of the work that these people have done. Thanks for tuning into this episode and the first season of Scenes and Songs. We had a blast making it. I hope you had just as much fun watching it. Follow us on Instagram and Twitter at Scenes and Songs. Subscribe on YouTube, like on Facebook, or for audio only, subscribe wherever podcasts are sold.
To get in contact with us, send us an email at scenes_songs@gmail.com. That's scenes, AMPERSAND, songs@gmail.com. Thanks so much for watching this first season of Scenes and Songs. If you've enjoyed yourself along the way, leave us a comment and let us know. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe, and we'll see you again real soon.